As Jesus crossed the lake at Galilee to the region of Gerasenes, ahead of him in the distance he spotted a man, unclothed and crying out as he cast himself against the rocks. Surrounding him were the tombs that he called home, and on his hands and feet were broken bindings and chains. The locals were unable to restrain him as he possessed immense strength, like that of something superhuman. The crazed man sees Jesus in the distance and is immediately struck with fear. He runs to him, falling to his knees and exclaiming,
"What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me."
This man, crazed and injured, had been possessed, something that Jesus knew immediately. He simply demanded the demon leave this poor man and asked, "What is your name?"
"My name is Legion, for we are many."
Thousands of demonic spirits were hosted within this human body, and facing the Son of God, they knew they would be destroyed. They again begged Jesus not to cast them out of the area. Nearby, thousands of pigs were being herded and tended to. The demons, desperate to remain, request for Jesus to allow them to possess the pigs near them, a request that Jesus permits. Legion, cast from its human host, takes over the souls of the massive swine, driving the pigs to rush over the hillside and drown in the nearby lake. As the locals rushed out to see what was happening, the once possessed man living among the tombs was now clothed and in his right mind, and they became struck with fear. They beg for Jesus to leave them, and he does. He departs back to the ship he came from. The exorcised man pleads with Jesus to allow him to join his party and embark on their travels together. But Jesus declines and instructs the man to go forward, back home, and tell everyone he can about how much the Lord has done for him. That is the story of Legion. It appears in Mark, Matthew, and Luke with some variations in the recollection. It is likely the most notable demonic possession that is featured in the Christian Bible and serves as an example to believers of Jesus' power against harmful and demonic spirits. It reinforces the existence of demonic possession and showcases the ability of Jesus and his power to rid people of such an ailment. And it has a much happier ending than today's story.
Disclaimer. This video does not serve to take any religious stand or avow or disavow any practice, worship, or following of any particular religious traditions. Hawk and Load's stance is to be nice to each other, sympathize, and empathize with your fellow human beings, and that dogs fucking rule and are totally the best thing humans have ever accomplished.
In a world full of so much evil, humans across time have looked to the metaphysical to explain a vast array of dark and dubious actions. That's not to discount how much good we all have around us, and hopefully we try to contribute to it with our own actions. But there's no denying how dark the human race can get. You, a viewer of a video on a channel like mine, may understand more than others how hellish the world can be, even in our modern days of science and therapeutic advancement. And across time, when these actions take place, there have been many curated methods of purging our societies of them. From ancient stories of malevolent spirits to biblical events of demonic purging, exorcisms and their place in modern culture can be more than just a plot device for a horror movie. Entertainment's portrayal of the practice likely influences your surface-level perception. And were you to end up in a situation where you believe someone is possessed by a demon, I would hope you wouldn't look to take matters into your own hands, but instead, call a priest. But what can happen when one's beliefs are so solid and unyielding that they take it upon themselves to purge a loved one of these malevolent spirits? Human history and psychology are extremely interesting to me. especially as we see it in the modern day. These true crime stories can give us a look into the minds of our fellow humans in a way that would be very difficult without the examples. My goal, for lack of a better word, is to present a cautionary tale, examine the culture around it, and give my layman's commentary, engaging in a larger discussion that I think is not only good for me and my life experiences, but hopefully anyone else who watches these videos. What I'm not here to do is sensationalize the death of anyone, especially child victims. We're all going to have our reasons for the morbid curiosity that drives us to be entertained by channels like mine. There are often overarching themes and lessons to be learned, even in these non-fictional stories. Today, we're going to look at the practice of exorcism throughout history and how it was spread and popularized in our modern culture, as well as how one small church in San Jose, California, took an unusual path for a bizarre situation, leading to nothing but horror and tragedy. So, with all of that said, this is the tragic case of young Arely.
The idea of the devil, evil incarnate, has irresistible symbolic force, and the character of Lucifer inhabits our greatest literature from Paradise Lost to Faust. But what about the devil not as a symbol, but as an actual willful being, a fallen angel in Christian belief that can not only affect human events, but enter human bodies? Tonight we go inside the controversial and extraordinary rite of exorcism.
Demonic possession, or something akin to it, is a phenomenon as old as humans. The ancient world, from east to west, all have stories of their populations being taken over by malevolent spirits, and have an array of ways to deal with it. And while these entities may not explicitly be demons, it's worth noting the many similarities in these stories told by the ancient people. The history of demonic possession as it relates to Christian religions begins mainly in the New Testament. Several stories of Jesus using his divinity to cast out demons, like Legion, appear in the stories told by his followers and others after his death. The belief that spirits were among the population was extremely prevalent in biblical times. Many mental and physical ailments that would, in the modern day, most likely be explained by science, were instead attributed to demons and metaphysical beings. As the oral passing of these stories progressed in the post-biblical age, these ideas would spread far and wide. As the sole arbiters of this information, the church leaders had the masses at their mercy, for better or worse, depending on who you ask. With Jesus no longer among the people, the clergy would take a more systematic approach to the idea of demonic possession and the methods required to purge them. Early church heads would write extensively on demons and exorcism, typically simply performed through the invocation of Jesus' name, the laying of hands on possessed individuals, and prayer. As human history reaches the Middle Ages and the cultures of European states, the idea of possession and the methods of exorcism would spread and take root deep in these populations. The Rituale Romanum is that how you say that? Roman ritual, first published in 1614, included an official rite of exorcism. The Catholic Church would go on to apply this exorcism ritual to an array of ailments, again, that would likely be attributed to mental or physical disorders in the modern day. As such, the intensity of the practice would vary depending on which disorder was being identified as demonic possession, opening the door for a world of trouble. As we reached the Enlightenment and science began to take over many of these disorders and ailments, widespread belief in possession would begin to recede. More rational alternatives and fractures in the worship systems of the Christian churches would lead to a bit of a decline in the use and belief in exorcism. However, the practice would see a resurgence as we reached the more modern age. In the latter half of the 20th century, there was a resurgence in interest in exorcism with certain Christian denominations. This resurgence was partly due to the charismatic movement, a movement within established or mainstream Christian denominations to adopt beliefs and practices of charismatic Christianity, with an emphasis on baptism with the Holy Spirit and the use of spiritual gifts. There would be a renewed focus on spiritual warfare among Pentecostal and evangelical Christians. The Roman Catholic Church also saw a renewed interest in the rite of exorcism, with more exorcists being trained in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. In the present day, charismatic Christianity has widely affected a myriad of Christian denominations throughout the United States. With the persistent prevalence of the Catholic Church as well as satanic panic in social media, The demons have yet to be cast back to hell permanently, at least to some factions. Some of these practices are still being used on individuals, children even, for explainable mental health issues. With the vast knowledge we have, equaled only by the distrust some have for institutions like the government, many resist and reject modern scientific and psychological truths. It's hard to blame them in some cases with how openly politicians and social leaders are grifting their wares and ideas. But the ethics surrounding it all should and will be called into question, especially here today as we look into our harrowing case.
Holy Lord, Almighty Father, everlasting God, and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who once and for all consigned that fallen tyrant to the flames of hell, who sent your only begotten Son into the world to crush that roaring lion, hasten to our call for help, and snatch from ruination and from the clutches of the noonday devil this human being made in your image and likeness.
1973 saw the release of the iconic horror staple, The Exorcist, a film directed by William Friedkin. It was a direct adaptation of William Peter Blatty's novel of the same name, released just 2 years prior. The book was inspired by real events that took place in the late 1940s to a boy given the pseudonym Roland Doe. After Roland's aunt, who was a spiritualist, introduced the young boy to a Ouija board, he began to experience a slew of troubling events like objects moving and floating around him and unexplainable noises. With Roland's family being deeply religious, they sought help from their Lutheran pastor and later on a Catholic priest, believing the young boy to be possessed by malevolent forces and would attempt multiple exorcisms to rid themselves of them. Thanks to the attention that the book and movie got, Roland's exorcism experience is one of the most famous in modern history. Skepticism and scrutiny continue to follow the story naturally, but the cultural impact of it is undeniable. And while not much is known about Roland and his life outside of the exorcism, it's believed that he went on to have a normal life, luckily unharmed from the events of his childhood. The theatrics of Catholic exorcisms are something to behold. It's been dramatized a million times by Hollywood and entertainment, but in the modern day, the practice and the beliefs surrounding its necessity feel wildly out of place. It feels, to me, that it would all serve to do nothing but traumatize not only the possessed individual, but any loved ones around to witness it. In an age where access to high-level psychiatric treatment and modern medicine is at its human historical peak, the environment and ongoing culture wars have injected a growing distrust of modern institutions. It is leading people to holistic and historically outdated practices and galvanizing a growing disdain for anyone who doesn't see the world in quite the same way. As nihilistic or cynical as it may be to wax poetic about all of this modern-day cultural disagreement, especially in the context of this long-standing religious practice, it's sure to be disagreed with, and I accept that. What that means is I'm going to get some crazy comments from people about the deep state and demonic possession, and honestly, I can't wait to read them. They're always my favorite. With the practice of exorcism in the cultural zeitgeist, at the very least, I feel that I should point out that institutions like the Catholic Church and their prescribed rituals and rites should be and normally are performed by a member of the clergy. For all intents and purposes, regardless of how you feel about it, they are professionals, for lack of a better term. Many religions and practices across the world, Christian or not, have plenty of analogous rituals. But I want to stress that unsafe engagement in these exorcisms should reflect poorly on the individuals haphazardly performing them and not their fellow followers and believers. Personal responsibility is a stance that I've taken in many of these cases, and hopefully it'll make more sense as we progress in today's story. While there have been notable examples of the practice in more recent years, few have ended in death, and I suppose that does strengthen justifications for its use. Institutions like the Catholic Church will deploy a trained exorcist to investigate claims of possession, and if deemed necessary, perform one based on the methods outlined in their belief system. Even here in the modern day, there is a structure to it. I'm not sure if I need to say this, but if you think someone you know is possessed by a demon, please seek medical advice first. But that isn't to say that it's never led to tragedy and heartbreak, which leads me to today's harrowing story. And we don't need to go back to the 40s or 50s. No, instead we're going to dial the clock back a mere 3 years to 2021. To a home in San Jose, California, and a family that would forgo the inclusion of a priest and pay a tragic price for it.
everyone that watches my story. My story. See, I'm too used to Snapchat and Instagram, but welcome to my channel. Okay, welcome to my channel. This video I'm just gonna talk about what I want to do. I wanna what I want to do on this channel, okay, and what I want it to consist of.
The evening hours of September 23rd, 2021 saw 3-year-old Arely suddenly waking from her sleep into a frantic episode of screaming and crying. Her mother, 25-year-old Claudia Hernandez, would be unable to quell her young daughter's outburst. Claudia's family were the members of a small Pentecostal church led by her father. After trying all night to get Arely to calm down, she believed that her daughter was possessed by an evil spirit that was causing her uncontrollable actions. She called her brother, Rene Hernandez Jr., who went by Aaron, to come over and help her as she felt her alone would not be enough to purge the malevolent entity. After a long night of trying to calm the young girl, Claudia and her brother decided to bring her to the church around 6 a.m. on the 24th. They brought her to an altar, hoping to channel the Lord's ability to purge this demon. They prayed over her and began to perform an exorcism there in the small church. Claudia believed that prayer was not enough and that she needed to physically purge the demon by forcing her daughter to vomit. To this end, Claudia stuck her fingers down the toddler's throat and pushed on her neck, trying desperately to induce vomiting. Over the course of what would total more than 12 hours, Arely would intermittently fall asleep, as stated by Claudia in later statements. Her father, the leader of their small congregation, would eventually arrive, and the three of them would pray and perform their exorcism for hours, and eventually, young Arely would vomit a clear purple substance. But it wasn't enough to convince them that they purged the demon, so they would continue. Arely hadn't been given any food or water since the day prior. There was nothing in her system to vomit. For most of the harrowing ordeal, all three adults held the screaming child down by her neck, chest, and legs. Towards the end of the exorcism, Claudia's father would compress the back and chest of the toddler with his hands while praying for approximately 10 minutes. After that, Arely was no longer moving or breathing, and it was apparent to the family that she was no longer alive. They waited hours to contact emergency services, and once they did, first responders would arrive to do what they could, but it was already far too late. An investigation would begin to examine the bizarre circumstances surrounding Arely's death. Pentecostals may often believe in things like miracles, but exorcisms are apparently very out of character for followers of that Christian sect. Rene Sr., Claudia's father, would state,
"If you read the Bible, you'll see that Jesus casts away demons and made sick people healthy again. It's not when I want to do it, it's when God, in His will, wants to heal the person. The preacher is like an instrument of God. What we do is what God says."
An autopsy would reveal the extent of the hours of exorcism performed on the young child, ultimately ruling that she was manually asphyxiated among other injuries. Medical examiners would obviously rule it a homicide. However, arrests were not immediately performed. Investigators would be determined to build a solid case in the face of such an uncommon event. Poor Arely's young life was literally snuffed out for struggling and crying during her torturous final hours. But hey, it is what it is.
Like I told you guys, like I could see here and be negative, but and be negative, like, oh, not being negative, but like be sad about that whole situation that she passed away. But it's like, there's no point, because it is what it is. It is what it is, she's not here with me. It is what it is, And it's like, what's the point? I'm just gonna be putting myself down when there's no point for me to do that. Like, I cannot change the past. And
that video was made 5 months after torturing her toddler to death. The videos on her channel would all be launched just months after the incident. I've seen it theorized that she was attempting to salvage her reputation or even capitalize on the media notoriety of the ordeal. Her demeanor and behavior in the video is nearly unchanged from her other vlogs, with her rambling, barely coherent, and repeating herself over and over. By this point, news of what had happened was widespread and certainly circulating among the San Jose area, so this was her attempt at telling her side of things. She seems completely unaware of the gravity of the situation and clearly doesn't look like she's worried about more than herself. Less than a week after posting this video, she would be arrested on charges of child abuse resulting in death for the murder of Arely Naomi Proctor.
An exclusive look inside the back room of a San Jose house. This home also served as a church where a 3-year-old girl died in an apparent exorcism. Now, 3 people have been arrested, the girl's mother, along with her uncle and grandfather.
Police arriving on the scene the evening of September 24th, just after the crime took place, would separate the 3 adult members of the family and question them. Their initial statements would reflect the story as I've told it previously, and it appears to me that with them feeling they had not done anything criminal, it is the most accurate account available. Stories would begin to change after the arrests, and as each member of the family put together a defense for their actions, certain details would be amended. Renee Sr., for example, would later say that he never compressed the child's chest, and once she appeared to pass away, he in fact did attempt CPR. He told investigators that he told them previously that no one had attempted life-saving measures because he didn't think they would believe him. Curious way to navigate the situation for sure. Initial questioning of the family would see Claudia calm and collected, doing most of the talking with arriving officers. Aaron, her brother, was distraught and crying, but those interviews indicated that the group believed Arely passed around 6 p.m., but 911 wasn't called until after 8. Testimonies for the preliminary hearings took place in March of this year, and with how recent the event is, trials and convictions have yet to take place. Even in the videos uploaded by Claudia, she seems to continue to believe what happened was directed by God. The only people that know exactly what took place and why are currently in custody awaiting their fate. Whatever that fate may be, there will be nothing close to the terrifying and completely senseless fate of 3-year-old Arely Naomi Proctor. And all of this happened because the toddler would wake up in the middle of the night and cry. It is a truly unbelievable story, and unfortunately, that is where it ends for now. It was an intensely heartbreaking case to look into, and I hope that her soul has found peace. Finding background information on the family was difficult. Typically, I like to cover the lives leading up to these crimes, but while there is a plethora of information on the murder itself, there isn't much else. There are the videos posted by Claudia's channel that give an insight to her and her personality, as well as some sparse information from the aftermath surrounding the filicide. The church that was formerly led by Claudia's father, Renee Sr., would be in the news once again sometime later after 2 members of the congregation were involved in a kidnapping where a child was taken and held for a number of hours before being rescued. What the hell is going on in that church?
Number 2, what do you think about life right now? I think, like, I don't know, like, what they meant, but like, I think maybe like what's going on, right? What's going on nowadays? And I feel like it's a lot, it's a lot. Like, a lot of negative things are going on, and I don't know. I feel like that's why it's important for you to be mentally, emotionally, and physically stable.
The practice of exorcism is a deeply interesting topic. From the anthropomorphizing evil deeds and actions in the form of biblical demons to the rituals and rites employed to expel them, there is a lot about it to ponder. Its popularization in modern culture with The Exorcist as a horror movie trope put it into the minds of millions. As we progress through modern times, a divide in our societies has led to institutional distrust, and it's going to be an interesting ride. I find these topics extremely interesting, and with them being so parallel to religion, it often brings out a certain type of commenter. My personal feelings on whether or not the devil is among us do not discount the beliefs of others. I am quite fallible, and I would never take the stance that I know better than everyone else about anything, and I hope that others are able to open their minds to these discussions. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. I'm just making dumb videos and participating in the public discourse. That being said, if any of you can put me in touch with the demon I can sell my soul to, My rent is due, and I'm open to negotiations. Plenty of religious practices are quite beneficial to those who believe and follow them. This story is not a reflection of those beliefs beyond the wild headlines that it warrants. Whatever the Hernandez family was doing, I really don't think it was an exorcism. I don't want this video to come off as me taking aim at any particular religion, but instead a group of people who committed something that I can't wrap my head around. To me, it's a story of some untold disconnect with reality, made all the more insane with the inclusion of the brother and father. These adults are supposed to raise and guide this young girl through her life, love and cherish the gift that she was, and be her unconditional protectors. Instead, they were her demise in service to an insanity that they called God. It is easily the most tragic case that I've covered so far, if for nothing else but the innocence that was subjected to torment that I wouldn't wish on anyone. No matter what you believe in or how you express it, there is very little peace to take away from it all.
Censored, here's the weird stuff I love. Imagine your vision is totally normal, and then one day you see demonic features everywhere on people only. People with a condition see parts of other people's faces distorted in shape, texture, position, or color. For Shara, that means grotesque, grimace, elongated eyes, and deeply etched scars. Demon face syndrome. Now, it's when an individual sees someone and their face seems distorted, almost satanic, demon-like.
If you've made it this far, thank you once again for letting me tell you another story. It's a complete dice roll whether or not anyone actually gets to set eyes on these, but if you're one of the few, thank you so much. It was one that I feel may need to be explored again in the future, so let me know how you felt about it. It felt a bit different, and honestly, my inability to find biographical information kinda threw me off a little. I try to make these more than just telling tragic stories and hope that you, the viewer, and myself come away with it knowing something we didn't before, or pondering something we didn't expect we would. If you liked the video, like the video. If you disliked the video, dislike it and let me know why. Remember to subscribe for more videos like this and my daily shorts, and if you're feeling really generous, tell your friends. If you want to support further, you can become a member or join the Patreon for video shoutouts and future perks. I'm still trying to balance everything, and I've been hyper-focused on getting a good release schedule, as well as improving editing quality and thumbnails and stuff like that. I'm a one-man operation, from writing and research to everything else, so if you have any criticisms, I'm super open to them. As a recently unemployed loser for the first time in 15 years, any support is deeply appreciated. If there are any cases or subjects you'd be interested in seeing me check out, let me know in the comments. Side note, if you're like a dog product company, Doc and Sarge would make wonderful salesmen. There, I told them, will you stop asking me to say that? I let them know. If you liked this video, you may like my video on the West Memphis 3. Remember to love your pets, and I'll catch you in the next video. Big Patreon and member shout out to Daniel, Gage, Jeremy, Leslie, Lisa, McLean, Richard, Ryan, Weapon Son Gaming, Craig, Dr. Spiderface, Christian. Big shout out for Melissa, who is both a member and a patron, Ghost Dragon, who did all the music for this video, and of course my mommy.